What is one random act of kindness a stranger did for you? Story 1. I'm a Seahawks fan living in Arizona. In 2011, a regular at the Starbucks I worked at gave me 4 tickets to the Seahawks at Cardinals game. It was the last game of the year, so he also gave us the money that was left on his stadium food card. He said it was use it or lose it and that it had about $200 left on it. The seats were club level and my 3 friends and I ate like kings. As a thank you, we pooled in and got him a $100 Starbucks gift card. Story 2. Years ago, I was on a summer road trip with some friends from Dallas to Austin. On the way down, the battery meter on my dashboard started acting funny. Jumping up then dropping down, all sorts of weird stuff. We make it down to Austin and we're supposed to go see my one friend's show, but I say I'm going to run to an AutoZone and see about buying a new battery. It was 6 or 7 p.m. and I assumed all the mechanics were closed. I should also say that this is way before smartphones were a thing, and only one of us even owned a cell phone. I buy a new battery and install it in the parking lot. Turn the car on, and it's not the battery that was the issue. Shit. I go and meet my friends after the show and say we should leave that night instead of the next morning. My rationale being that if we drive at night, we won't need the AC. This is Texas in the middle of the summer, so even at night it's going to be hot, but not unbearable, and therefore can use less battery power. We all pile in my car and get about 20 miles outside the city when my car dies. While we didn't need AC, we did need headlights. We're pulled over on the side of the road. My friend with the cell phone calls AAA, and they say it'll be an hour or so before anyone is able to make it out. While we're standing there on the side of the road, in the near pitch black, a truck pulls over in front of my car. A man gets out and starts walking towards us. All of my friends take a step back, nominating me to do the talking/get killed first. The man asks us what the problem is. I reply that my car's dead. He says he has a tow chain in the back of his truck, and would be able to tow us to Dallas, which is about 200 miles away. This seems like a terrible idea since I'll have to ride in my car steering and using the brake since it's only going to be attached by a chain. But I was 19 years old and stupid, so after my friends and I talk it over, we say okay. He says that he's got a small trailer at his place about 50 miles away that we could use to tow my car, but until then, I'm steering a dead car about 3 feet away from this guy's bumper. Myself and my ex-girlfriend are in my car, and my other 2 friends are in the truck. It wasn't until later that I learned the story of the truck driver from my friends who were riding with him. Turns out, a year or so earlier he'd been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Instead of doing treatment, he decided to accept his fate and spend whatever time he had left driving all over Texas helping people who were stranded on the side of the road. I can't remember his name anymore, but I'll never forget him rescuing us that night. Story 3. Spring 2018. I accidentally stumbled upon a wedding dress I loved for $60 with only 3 weeks left until my wedding. I called around everywhere and not one local business could fit me in for alterations. I was discussing this with a coworker on our hospital lunch break in a quiet area, and a nurse from the cancer center pops around the corner and says, "I do alterations. I'd love to look at it." Taken aback, I ask her what she usually charges for her work. She says, $50. This is extremely cheap for wedding dress alterations. I accept her offer, get her number, and we arrange for me to bring it in on our lunch break the next day. She had me do several fittings, just to make sure it's perfect. She even purchased additional material for part of it. During those times, we spoke about our lives and she told me that her mother passed this winter. They used to sew together, and working on projects like this makes her feel close to her mom again. On the day I pick it up, she hands me the dress with a huge smile. I try to give her the money and she won't take it. She says it's on her, in honor of her mother. I broke down and we both cried together. I promised to pass on her good deed one day. Story 4. One of my most vivid childhood memories is of me at the local bar and grill with my parents, and I was like 6 and looking at a very specific doll in a claw machine. It was Tweety Bird in a spacesuit. I was so zoned out, I didn't even know someone walked up until the claw came down, picked it up, and dropped it in the chute in one fell swoop. I turned to see a man who looked homeless/transient taking the Tweety Bird out of the chute and immediately bending down and handing it to me. Neither of us said anything, just smiled at each other, and then he turned and walked out of the restaurant. Story 5. I was on a trip on Norway and it was literally my last night in the city and the country. I lost the midnight train, but no problem, I could still take the first train in the morning. In the meantime, I went to the dock because that's where all the nightlife was. The bar closed at 2 a.m. and the train passed at 5 a.m., so a guy I had met at the bar told me there's no way you're gonna spend 3 hours walking around, and he took me to his house. He gave me the worst coffee I've ever had and we spent those 3 hours talking. Then he took me to the train station, bought my ticket to the airport, and before he left he told me I'm drunk and I haven't slept, So tomorrow I might not remember you, but it's been a pleasure helping you. Story 6. Christmas Eve a couple years back. I had worked a shift at the hospital, not a doc or high-paid person, and was trying my best to get to my family's house about 2 hours away before dinner. My brakes on my car just are not working right. It's snowing like crazy, and I'm thinking there is no hope. I saw the local mechanic was still open, so I pulled in and told him what was going on. Half hour or so later he comes out and tells me what was wrong and that he had gone ahead and fixed it. I asked him what I owed him for the work. He said, "Get home to your family safe and have a Merry Christmas." I felt like I was in a Hallmark movie. It is now the only place I will take my car. Story 7. I was an American in China and 6 months pregnant. I was at the train terminal and the hormones kick in. I start crying for literally no reason, which makes me only cry harder. A very tiny old Chinese woman grabs my shoulder and said something I don't understand. She then grabs me and gave me a huge hug. When she pulled away, she gave me a great smile. It was exactly what I needed. Story 8. When I hit no money as a student, I went to do a shop with the little money I had left. Turns out my phone bill came out and I was flat broke and had to leave all the shit at the cashier whilst I went outside to work out if I could loan money. This absolutely amazing woman comes out and said she saw the whole thing and she has a son who's a student who gets into similar situations, and she gave me a hug and forced some money in my pocket. I was too flabbergasted to say anything then, but lady, if you're reading this, you really changed my opinion about people in general and made sure I ate for the first time in a week. Thank you, kind stranger, and I hope life rewards you. Story 9. I'm now in my 30s. I've had quite a few over the years and I try to repay it as I can to others. So here's a few random acts of kindness people have done for me. 1. Flying back on military leave, had a stopover in Vegas. Was really hungry, but military pay is kinda shit, so I figured I'd just get Burger King. Standing in line and some dude who wasn't even in line came up and just went, "Here man, you look tired. Thank you for your service, let me get your meal." Handed me a $20 and walked away. I was like, wait, $20 is way too much just for BK. Got to the front of the line and ordered, came out to like $18. Apparently the Vegas airport BK is way more expensive. That surprised the shit out of me and I was glad he'd given me a $20. 2. Crashed my motorcycle on a backcountry road. Group of bikers found me and called one of their friends to bring a truck, took me back to my apartment, took my bike to one of their guys' place who lived by me, and stayed with me to monitor. Ended up taking me to the ER a couple hours after because I started repeating myself. Had a concussion. They stored my bike for me for about a month till I could get my insurance payout and offload the wreckage. 3. Watching the World Series in a crowded bar. Old guy next to me chatted throughout the game. End of the game said I reminded him of his son that he's drifted apart from but was going to make an effort to reconnect with after talking with me. We ended up back at the bar for the rest of the series, and when the Giants won, he covered the entire bar's tab. Also bought my dinners and drinks, unprompted, for every game of the series. When he picked up the whole place's tab, I was like, what the duck? He goes, my bonus alone last year was $300,000. Don't worry about it. I've had a lot of other times people have randomly bought me meals when I was pretty broke. So now sometimes I'll randomly buy the person's meal behind me in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru, or help other veterans out since I had old vets help me out getting on my feet. I volunteer with homeless orgs and Habitat for Humanity and food banks. You don't have to make 6 figures to give your time to others. Keep the random acts of kindness cycle going. Story 10. I had a cyst inside my ovaries that became incredibly painful out of nowhere. I was white as a sheet and managed to leave work and get to the pharmacy nearby. I was hunched over and even lying on the floor at certain times because I was in so much pain waiting in line. After I paid for whatever it was that I bought, a lady in line asked if I needed a ride anywhere. She took me to the urgent care clinic and even stayed with me to take me home. What an angel. Story 11. I was parked on a downtown street in the full sun. The lady that pulled into the next space started installing her windshield sunshade before she walked away. I said, "You're lucky to have one of those, I must get one, too." She opened her trunk and handed me a brand new one, saying, "This is an extra that was given to me, and I now give it to you." She even showed me how best to install it. So I thanked her profusely, and off she went. Later, I spotted the same one online for $59.95. Story 12. I showed up 1 minute late to the airport to catch a critical flight. People were literally still going through security, but they wouldn't let me enter the line. I had a breakdown in the waiting area. Some random old guy came and handed me $20 and said, "I know this doesn't help whatever it is you just missed, but if they let you take the next one, at least go have a hot breakfast on me. Take care." And he just shuffled off on his way. I was floored. Story 13. I was at Target to do some shopping when my baby had a blowout diaper. I also had my 2-year-old with me. There was no family restroom, so I had to use the changing station in the ladies' room. My toddler was out of control and was just itching to do gross stuff like lick the floors or play in toilet water or something that would horrify literally anyone on the planet except a mischievous 2-year-old. A woman, probably in her 40s, saw my predicament, baby on changing table and me unable to physically intervene with the 2-year-old, and interacted with my toddler so I could deal with the shitsplosion my tiny infant son produced. They counted sinks, jumped from tile to tile, made silly faces to one another. It probably only lasted 2 to 3 minutes, but it was the most helpful thing someone could have done for me in that overwhelming moment. Story 14. I was in Whitefish, Montana for work and decided to go to a discreet gay bar. Met this guy who I thought was pretty cool. We go back to his place and his roommates are there and everything seems cool. They're pounding back beers and asked if I wanted one. I said sure, why not? Well, after my second beer I wasn't feeling all that hot and decided to lay low. When all of a sudden one of his roommates demanded that I drink another. I tell her no. She tells me no, that wasn't a question. You drink another or you leave. It escalated so quickly I didn't know what to do, so I politely said duck off and left. The thing was, my hotel was 15 to 20 miles away. I start walking back at 1 a.m. in the woods with no cell service, and to top it off, this was in October. It was 20 degrees out. This old pickup truck in the opposite direction makes a U-turn and pulls up right next to me. This old man opens his door and asked where I was going. I told him and then added I don't have any cash to give him for the ride if he's offering. He tells me he wasn't even thinking of asking for money for someone walking home by themselves at 1 a.m. I hop in and we start talking, and he tells me how his son died on this road from a drunk driver and how he rides up and down the road when he can't sleep. He looks out for people hitchhiking after the clubs to get them home safely. Story 15. I was running and dropped my MP3 player without realizing it on a busy city street. A nice older African man literally stopped in traffic and flagged me down. When I didn't respond because I was spacing out, he honked and waved his hands for like 5 seconds. People were beeping for him to go, but he was persistent. When he had my attention, he said, "He has it. He has it. Hurry." I turned around and ran 2 blocks and caught up with a guy who had just picked it up and tried to fast walk away. Thanks, dude. Story 16. One time my motorcycle died at an intersection. I was like 16 or 17 maybe. It died while I was rolling and I just rolled right through the intersection. It was still a green light luckily, and done the Stewart about a quarter mile maybe. I pulled the bike to the side of the road and onto the sidewalk. It was nighttime, like maybe 10ish, and I was riding home from work to my parents' house. The intersection was at a mire known locally as the Ghetto Mire, and the area I rolled to was almost Section 8 kinda housing. On the stoop of the apartments was a gathering of fellas, just drinking 40s, smoking, talking, and for some reason wearing generally the same color. Needless to say, I was sketched out, like really sketched out. It was dark and I was a white-looking kid. I'm half and half white/black, but look like a constantly slightly tanned white boy. I was scared. I'm standing there trying to figure out what was wrong with my $700 Jank-S Kawasaki Ninja, just keeping a lookout over my shoulder the whole time. Then, out of nowhere, this man walks up the sidewalk and I'm like, here we go, gotta empty my pockets I guess. The man stops next to me, looks at me and smiles. "Are you okay? Do you need some help? Do you know what's wrong? I have a flashlight." I told him I had no idea what was wrong and I just was going to push it up the hill to the mire and call my dad. He offered to help and handed me the flashlight, and he helped me push the bike up the sidewalk to a car wash. It was closer and well lit enough. In assuming he could tell I was sketched about the area because he talked to me the whole walk. I called my dad and he went to the wrong car wash, so I had to wait twice as long for him. The man talked to me the whole time just about life and growing up and just talk. I didn't pay too much attention to what he was saying, I just knew it was calming me down. My dad shows up finally. The man helps us put the bike in his van. It was a little 230-ish pound 250cc bike, so it was small enough to fit in a van. And then he says have a good night and just walks away. I'll never forget that moment in my life. I feel like that was outside the scope of the question, but it felt good sharing that story and remembering it in the process. I'm having kinda a shit life right now mentally, so that was nice typing that for me. Story 17. Today I was going on a job interview. I started my route extremely early to be sure I would go there in time, but as fate has it the train was late anyway. So when I got off the train I had to basically trot my way to the company. It's a very hot day and I got all sweaty in my face and stuff. While I was in the elevator, this guy who works there asks me if I'm going to human resources. I reply yes, and then he proceeds to tell me where the bathroom is so I can wash up a little bit before going in. Damn it, I didn't thank him then and there, but I thank you now, kind stranger. Story 18. When I was in an abusive relationship and being starved, I had to go away on business and had the opportunity to meet up with a friend. While I was waiting for him, a homeless charity gave me a cup of tea because they thought I was a junkie. Given how thin I was, I explained I wasn't homeless or a junkie, but they said I looked like I needed it. I burst into tears. It was the nicest thing someone had done for me in years. Story 19. When I was 16, I worked at a frozen yogurt store and had to close late a lot, 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., by myself, no manager, supervisor or coworker. One night, 5 minutes before close, a woman who worked next door at the veterinary clinic walked in for her froyo. As she was paying, another man walked in but was being really suspicious, just sat down and looked at the machines but didn't make an effort to buy anything. The woman asked me quietly if I was alone and I said yes, so she nodded and just stood in front of the cash register with me. Eventually, after realizing that she wasn't leaving, the man left without buying or saying anything. I thanked her and locked up the store. I think a lot about what could have happened if she didn't stay with me, and am really grateful for her. Story 20. I was visiting friends in a town in the Midwest with my kids and we went to an ice cream shop. My oldest was quite excited, running around, being silly while we sat outside. There was a middle-aged couple sitting out there too, so I kept asking her to come sit by me and be quiet, so she wouldn't bother them. As we got up to leave, the couple came over and asked if they could give my daughter a gift card for the shop. I was speechless for a moment but said, "Of course, that's so kind of you. We lost a daughter years ago who looked so much like her," they said. "Make sure she gets more ice cream," and they left. I cried for a bit after that. Story 21. When my son was a baby, I was really nervous about nursing him in public. Early on, a man had seen me trying to nurse him and he kind of scoffed and rolled his eyes and made a disgusted face at me, and I just could not let it go. I was at a park trying to coordinate getting him latched under this blanket and was almost tearing up in frustration, and an older woman, in her late 70s, early 80s, sat next to me and said, "They can be so picky, can't they?" and then patted my knee gently. I just nodded and said, "Yeah," and she said, "Looks like the blanket is giving you a hard time. Can I hold it for you?" And then she just gently lifted the corner that kept falling off my shoulder and held it so it wouldn't slip and I could use my free hand to get us all set up. I was shocked and stunned and thanked her so much. And once we were settled, she just said, "Not a problem, dear, we all could have used a hand with our babies. Maybe someday, you won't feel like you need the blanket." And then she just left. I never, ever forgot her. Story 22. My buddy and I are in the Navy. We worked the night shift from Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. When we got off, we went to the Waffle House, which is just what we did after every night shift, so we were still in uniform. I don't remember if we even remembered that it was Christmas until we got there. When it came time to pay up, we were told that 3 separate people had paid 3 separate hosts for our food. Our waitress, who knew us pretty well, gave us our paid check and the rest of the money, about $50, which we left as a tip. Story 23. I was 21. My father died, my girlfriend dumped me, I failed out of college. I was really depressed. My life was turning into a giant heap of shit. So I decided to hop in my car and drive. And drive. And drive. After a couple of days, I was in a Waffle House somewhere outside of Atlanta. It was 3 a.m. and I was the only customer. A guy walked in and sat right next to me. I thought it was odd, because there were so many open seats. We got to talking and somehow I opened up to this guy about life and all of my struggles. He listened, he cared. He told me to go back home because running away from my problems was not the right answer. We hugged, I cried. 8 years later, I have a MS degree in materials science, work in an awesome field at a job I love. I have a new girlfriend, a new outlook on life. It's not perfect by any means, but I attribute all of this success to this stranger listening to me in a Waffle House outside of Atlanta. Story 24. When I was 16 years old, I got pissed off at my parents and decided to leave my home in Los Angeles and drove my car to San Diego with 2 friends without telling anyone. Long story short, we got picked up by the cops in San Diego. One friend and I were reported missing by our parents back in LA, so they held him, and because the cop was cool with me, the police department bought me a Greyhound ticket back to LA and dropped me off at the bus station in downtown San Diego. My other friend was released to his sister who lived in San Diego. Greyhound drivers were on strike, so buses were delayed. After a few hours, I decided to leave the bus station and find my car, which was at Balboa Park. Not long after I left the Greyhound station, in the middle of the night and not knowing how to get to Balboa Park, I was approached by a homeless man asking me for change. I told him I didn't have anything and that I need to find my car and drive back to LA and that I might not have enough gas to make it home. The homeless man then gave me a couple dollars in change that he had and gave me walking directions back to Balboa Park. I declined the money and he said, "You need it more than I do right now," and he insisted I take it. I found my car where I had some change I used for gas along with the money the homeless man gave me. I barely made it back home without running out of gas. If the homeless guy didn't insist on giving me his change, I would have run out of gas before making it back home. I made it to my uncle's house where my cousin told me my uncle, aunt, and parents were all waiting for me at the Greyhound station in LA since that's where the San Diego PD told them I'd be. Story 25. Okay, I'm gonna tell the story exactly as it happened, but it's kind of hard to believe. One day when I was around 19, I took my father's car without permission to go to the 7-Eleven that's a block away from my house, because I simply wanted to drive. When I got to the store I started panicking, thinking my dad could get home and not see the car, so I tried to get out of the parking spot and I hit another car. I considered running. I was a dumb 19-year-old girl, come on, but I decided I had to own up to this. Also, I could see everyone inside the store turn their heads. The owner of the other car came out super chill and saw the hit. It was on the back of his car and I started apologizing over and over and explained that I had no license, no insurance, no permission to take the ducking car, but I'd still take the responsibility of this. Before I could even give him my info, he looked at me calmly and said, "Well, run before your dad gets home." I was shocked. He even helped me get out of the parking spot properly. Sir, wherever you are, I hope life has repaid that act of kindness 10 times. P.S. When I got home my dad was there, saw the hit, and I learned a damn lesson. Story 26. Not exactly a stranger, it was a guy I knew in passing when I was in college. On 2014 I was kidnapped on a Mexican border town. We got pulled over by a couple of guys with automatic weapons and balaclavas and forced to move to the rear seats of the car. They drove us. One of my cousins accompanied me for the trip, around while trying to get information from us. It was the company car, so I stuck to the "I'm just an employee" line. My son had just been born a month ago, so I was basically praying that if these assholes killed me, that they dropped my body somewhere where the police could find it. Insurance payoff. After getting us to a store and emptying our debit cards, not our credit cards though, they beat us and dropped us at the US border. We managed to cross and ask for a travel permit and walk to the first gas station, where I started asking people there to let me pay with my credit card and get cash, as I didn't know the NIP to get money from the ATM. We finally got enough to pay a taxi to get to a hotel near there and started the process of letting family, friends and job what happened, that we were okay, that we were looking into options to return home. And in walks this guy that I haven't seen in more than 10 years. He saw me beaten up and asked what was going on. Told him what happened. He just pulled his wallet and gave me $500. The same thing happened to him some months before and another guy gave him cash to return home. Honestly, a beacon of light in a very shitty situation. Story 27. A stranger warned my best friend and I about a creepy man following and staring at us. We were getting ready for a concert and decided to take some pictures outside. I'd say we were about 1 mile from the venue. My best friend started taking pictures of me and a man on a bike stopped next to us. He said, "There's a creepy man staring at you. He's around the corner and keeps looking. I would take your pictures somewhere else. Be careful." And left. Sure enough, we caught him peeking around the corner. We left. The sad thing is, we ended up warning several people about the same thing. As we got closer to the venue, several creepy older men were staring and following 12 to 13-year-old girls. All the concert goers band together to keep each other safe. Story 28. I was 19 years old and had just moved out of my parents' house. I was in college, working a shitty retail job, living in a shoebox apartment, and broke AF. I had $50 per week to spend on food. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm living on coffee and Sprite, and finals are next week. My shirt has 3 stains and 5 holes, my hair is in a messy bun because I didn't have time to wash it, and my sweatpants look like I slept under a bridge in them. My eye bags would have to be checked luggage if I was flying. I'm at the local budget grocery store, standing in front of the chicken, agonizing over whether I can afford to get some to add to the 15-bean soup I'm splurging on this week. I want that chicken, but I know I can't afford it. A voice comes from behind me, "Get the chicken." I turn around, it's a woman, white, probably mid-50s. Tall, with dark hair that's gone pretty gray, and lots of laugh lines. She's smiling at me. "Pardon me? You should get the chicken." "Oh, well, you see, I'll pay for it." What did she just say? I must have heard her wrong, or maybe I'm just hallucinating this whole thing. "Ma'am," she cuts me off. My face, I assume, looks as though I've been slapped with a fish, which is probably what clued her into my train of thought. "I've been where you are. This isn't charity." This is me just doing what I wish someone had done for me when I was broke and hungry and too proud to ask for help. Please, let me buy the chicken for you. She was still smiling, but she looked sad too. She was so sincere. I was hungry and broke. But I wasn't proud enough to say no. I caved in 10 seconds. We started to chat. Her name was Kayla. I picked out the chicken breast that I wanted, and then she dragged me back over to the produce section when she saw that I didn't have any fresh produce in my cart. When was the last time you ate a nice fresh tomato at home? She asked. The answer was when I still lived with my parents. She walked around the store with me for an hour, asking about my life. I asked about hers. She had a daughter, she said, named Amy, who would have been my age if she hadn't been hit by a drunk driver 3 years before. She had a son, too, named Colin, who was off at college, who was going to be an electrical engineer soon. She was very proud. She bought me $467.58 worth of food that day. I cried as they were ringing me up. I felt so guilty. She didn't even know me and she was helping me. She would put things in my cart and when I would protest, she would ask me if I needed it. I had no argument that would sway her. Not just food either. She bought me almost 3 months worth of toilet paper. 4 months of period supplies. Deodorant, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, toothpaste. She helped me load up my car. She gave me a huge hug, told me I was going to do great, and walked away. I've never seen her again, but that was the best thing anyone's ever done for me. Thanks, Kayla, wherever you are, for being a ducking amazing person to a tired, hungry, broke kid who needed it.